Very good evening to everybody. Very good evening,
Good
Akhil.
evening.
Good to see you. Hi, Puneet. Thanks for joining us. Fantastic to see you. All right, this is Startup Sunday and 6 o'clock. As every week, we are bringing you some interesting sessions. This time, we have decided to change the format slightly. Uh, we have with us Mr. Akil. Akil Udayakumar is our CTO, good friend of mine. Most importantly, extremely proficient programmer, and that's the reason he's here. So this will be the first of a few sessions, and the idea here is really to talk tech. It's all about tech. We're not really talking too much business or investments or pitch decks. It's all about the code, right? Like they say, show me the code. And over to Akil. Akil, very warm welcome to the show. Welcome to Startup Sunday.
Thank you.
How are you doing?
I'm doing fine, thank you.
All right. So you have some very interesting things planned for the community.
Yes,
Uh,
I have.
so can you quickly give us an overview before you get into the entire
Yeah.
session?
The title of the program is Full Stack 2021. So, if you want to build your own full stack company, what tech stack would you probably use to build it?
So again, as we yesterday we introduced this brand new series called Full Stack 2021, and the idea really is to give people the power to build end-to-end applications by themselves, right? Today you have to depend on large teams to be able to get something reasonably worthwhile, but with this stack that Akil is going to introduce people to, uh, we are confident that anybody can, at home, and especially now with the lockdowns, unfortunately, being reimposed, uh, you can spend your time in the most productive way. And so that's really the idea. So over to you, Akil. The show is yours, and best of luck.
Thank you. So, we'll start off with the presentation. I'll just share my screen.
Audience may click on the screen to full screen it. Yes, Akil.
Is it? Yeah.
You need to share your screen.
Yeah, it's being shared.
I just have to reshare it once. You can just just reshare it again. All right, we're good. Good to go, Akil. Over to you.
Yeah. So thank you. So welcome to the Full Stack 2021 series. Today we'll be talking about Django basics. So what is Django? Django is a Python framework designed to help you build specifically database-backed websites quickly and securely. It's based on the MVT architecture, that is Model Views Templates, where models help you define the database and interactions between the database and your application. Templates are the front end, the HTML, CSS, JavaScript that the user interacts with, and views is your business logic that ties together the whole application. uh, Django is based on a few design philosophies. DRY, which is don't repeat yourself. So a Django project is composed of many apps. You can transfer apps between different applications, and also loose coupling. In loose coupling, so you have all the different parts of Django don't need to know about each other. They just need to know about the common interface between them. Django also has growing async support. So initially, Django is based on a request and response model, wherein the user sends a request and then Django processes it and then sends back a response. But now Django is coming up with async views, and it already had WebSocket support about 3 years back. And Django has a batteries included philosophy, wherein they provide uh, almost everything that you need to build a website. So they have an authentication layer, they have a middleware layer, they have security, they provide extra security. So why use Django? So firstly, for small teams as well as large teams, they help you build a web application much faster than any other traditional ways. If you Next is secure application. So they secure your application against many common attacks. So like MySQL, like an SQL injection attacks, uh, They provide a CSRF framework and many other tools to protect you against many of the common attacks. And then you can implement additional tools to protect yourself against many more attacks. Then ORM, which is one of my favorite features of Django, which is Object Relation Mapper, which basically provides an abstraction on top of the database. So you can Django supports a variety of databases, relational databases like MySQL, SQLite, Postgres, etc., as well as some of the newer databases like document-oriented databases like MongoDB. And you have a common interface between all those databases. So you just uh, you have a simple API on top, and then no matter what your database is, Django will interface between you and the database. Django is also very scalable. Sites like NASA, Reddit, Instagram, I think at least the initial version of Instagram were built on top of Django. Django also provides an inbuilt admin API, which is really helpful initially while building, so that you can see what's currently in the database. And also, the later versions of the Django admin look really nice, so that you can even use it with your customers. You can have your customers use them. Django is also open source with a really good large community. Uh, Django has a Django has excellent documentation. So they have this Django project, which is their website, and it's really detailed with a lot of tutorials and documentation, apart from lots of documentations that you'll find on YouTube. Django has a rich ecosystem, so lots of apps are available. So if you want to integrate like authentication, there are multiple various of forms of authentication, like token-based auth, session-based auth. Then there are also other applications for almost everything available. And since Python is a easy language, you can also adapt uh, the existing applications to suit your needs. Django is also the inbuilt testing framework, which you can use to ensure that you have good code coverage, testing coverage. And as mentioned before, Django has growing async support with Django is currently on 3.2 version, and 4 versions has even more features for async. Now let's come to the Django models. In Django models, you define the schema for the database. So instead of manually typing SQL queries to create your database, you just Django provides a list of variables and data types. You can specify your database, and then using the ORM, you can create the database and manage it on the fly with Django. Django has a concept of migrations in which your database schema that you've mentioned in your models will be converted to raw SQL statements, which will be executed. These migrations files can be saved in your version control, so that your production and your local environments can be synced up. And as mentioned before, Django supports many databases like MySQL, SQLite, Postgres, and changing the database is simple. You just have to changing the database is simple. You just a settings file. There's a settings file. Just change the database path and install the right client, and then the database is changed. So coming to Django views, which represent the business logic of your application. Traditionally, in older versions, Django had synchronous views where the views would get a request, it would process it, and then it would spit out a response. Now, I think the latest version, 3.2, just introduced async views, and the future version of Django will have much more async features. Django also has a URL router. So in the URL routers, in the older versions of Django, you had a list of regex where each view would be compared to the list of regex that you specify, and that any URL that matches that, any regex that matches that particular URL will transfer control to the view. Now you have in the newer version of Django, you can also have regex and also path-based views. And Django has function-based and class-based views. In function views, you just basically have the views of a function. In class-based views, you can reuse a lot of the views. So your normal HTTP methods get, post, put and delete. You can write one class-based view, and then that single class-based view will handle all 4 methods. Django templates, which are the front end of the application, what the user sees and interacts with. Normally the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Django also, you can using Django templates, you can also create things like CSV files or any text-based format. Django makes use of the drive principle, the don't repeat yourself principle, by allowing you to split the template into various parts. So you can have like a header.html or footer.html, and then you can just include the parts instead of each template having the header and footer repeatedly. Django's template language is called DTL, Django template language. You can also use something called Jinja, which is another alternate. Now let's look at the request response lifecycle. So a client, it could be either a device like my laptop or a mobile phone, or normally a browser will send a HTTP request. That request will be matched against a list of URLs. In newer versions of Django, you can have a path-based URL, so it will check the path against the request path, and then once it finds a match, it will transfer the control of the request to the view file. So each application has a views.py file. That views.py file will interact with the database through the URL. It will update the database, either read, write, etc. Then it will fetch the corresponding HTML file. Once it fetches the corresponding HTML file, it will create the response, and then it will send out the response back to the user. So that's it. Thank you.
Yes, Akil, that was very, very crisp and a very quick introduction. Maybe you should have had a few more slides, but I think you're saving that for the next episode. Right?
Yeah.
So I think let's just answer a couple of questions here. Let's kind of zoom out. Now, this theoretical information is available in most places. Now, let us try and understand. We did mention a .py file. Now, what is a .py file for the audience? What is a .py?
Okay, so Django is written in Python, and Python, the file extension is .py. So those are.
So .py is basically a Python file.
Yes.
And what Django effectively is basically a framework written in Python for
Yes.
web applications.
Yes.
Now, Python by itself, quite a few people will be familiar with Python.
Yes.
But you really cannot build web applications using just Python. You can, but it's just a lot of work, right? And so a lot of that kind of boilerplate stuff is already done with Django. So you start off with 5 or 6 files, settings.py, init, your WSGI file. These are all your basic files that you need, and these are all in Python. So Django gives you a very elegant framework to kind of bootstrap these files when you get started with the application.
Yes.
So why Django over some other web frameworks? I mean, let's say, in the olden days, when I first got into Django, the competition was Django or Ruby on Rails.
Yeah.
Back in the day, 2010, there was, Ruby was a very nascent and interesting language, and Ruby on Rails was the big nemesis of Django. Of course, many people back then chose Ruby on Rails, and I would say many of them would also come from the PHP kind of school, where they prefer Ruby on Rails. Us, of course, we are always Python first, and it was based on a lot of research that we decided to go with Django. And luckily, I think we've made the right choice. Looking back 10 years, I think today there is no Ruby on Rails, and I'm happy that we didn't spend a lot of our time on that. What are the frameworks that are available today apart from Django? What are the options do people have?
So you have in Python, you have lots of other frameworks like Flask. You have Fast API, which is going quite well. So the main difference between Django and say Flask and Fast API is Django is a battery included, so all-inclusive API. So you have auth mechanism, you have lots of security inbuilt. They provide kind of like a structured. So each app has a views, a templates, URLs, etc. In Flask and Fast API, they're more light, so they don't have as many features, but they allow you to build a little bit faster than Django. So it depends on your use case. So like if you want to build a more production ready app, not to say that you can't build in the other frameworks as well, but if you want to build like in a structured way, you want to follow Django's best practices because they have uh, those design philosophies that I mentioned earlier. They kind of uh, try to implement those design philosophies as much as possible. So if you follow Django, you know that you're going to get a app which is most probably reusable. It's not going to involve too much of code duplication if you build it well. It's going to be secure against most of the common attacks. So that's why people might want to try Django rather than other applications,
Also,
other
I think
frameworks.
the beauty of Python, I mean, I'm
Python,
just
yeah,
talking of Python against non-Python frameworks.
yeah,
Definitely, Python has a big role to play in Django
yes,
being successful, if not like the most important factor. I think Django itself gets its philosophies from Python, and
yeah.
a lot of the philosophies of Python, readable URLs, clean syntax. I think a lot of these things kind of, get fathered into Django. Uh, you know, just from a developer standpoint, Akil, who are your inspirational developers? Who are developers or hackers that you look up to, or who do you think are world changing programmers?
So there's uh, in just one second, I'm blanking out his name. There's this guy who created MapReduce in Google. Forgot his name is.
Sure, we can pick out his name, no problem. Who
Yeah,
else? What about the old Linus Torvalds and Guido van Rossum and
yeah.
the legends?
Uh, yeah, Linus. I mean, when I was studying in RIT, we heard about a story about Linus Torvalds. So he was frustrated with not with the existing version control system, and then like he spent like a weekend, just 2 3 days, and then build out Git, which is like the cornerstone of all software programming, modern programming now.
Git, I think version management, definitely.
Yeah,
Linus Torvalds, of course, for Linux, which he built
yeah,
upon Unix.
yeah,
And that also, I think, was, to me, principles and philosophies matter a lot, right? I think
yeah,
if you're a great programmer, but you have, succumbed to a menial cause, I think that reduces your whole, the way I think the world looks at you. I think Guido van Rossum, I think
yeah,
the inventor of Python,
yeah,
absolutely, brilliant. Today, I think he's at Microsoft,
yeah,
helping them out. Windsurf, Tim
yeah,
Berners-Lee, I think some of these people have changed the technology landscape for good.
yeah.
Uh,
And then
he's
there's this programmer called I don't know his full name, but his Twitter handle is Feroz. I follow him on Twitter. So he in college he built out like a YouTube clone over a weekend. Like his friends challenged him to build out a YouTube clone, and it was so impressive that the YouTube CEO at that time offered him a job. But he continued working with YouTube, and then he's built out many companies that have been acquired by Yahoo, etc. And he's also released something related to WebRTC file sharing, which is very with one of the killer features is as the file is being uploaded, can other people can download it, so you don't have to wait.
cutting
Yeah,
up the file. And that's something that we are also working on. We won't
yeah,
reveal too much of IPFS and other stuff, but anyway, so really nice. I think we should also look at some Indians. I think it's critical. The
yeah,
moment we speak of programming, always we get names of Torvalds and all of these people. I think some pure mathematicians also play a big role in computer science. People like Srinivas Ramanujam, who I think is always been an inspiration for me. Just to understand that his work is today dictating the future of mathematics. And when he was alive, people didn't really understand the kind of the magnitude of his work. But I think people like that who today are now, the moment science has caught up, and now they're seeing what next, and then they look at these people for answers. I think
yeah.
that's again brilliant. Uh, so fantastic. I think what's coming up. I mean, this is again a short session. We want to keep this about half an hour today. But Akil, what's the roadmap for Full Stack 21? What are your
Yeah.
thoughts? And yeah, what can the audience kind of learn from this in the next few episodes?
Yeah. So the first episode was mainly about why you may want to or may not want to use Django, and the second session is going to be more on the individual parts of it, like how to the admin API. I'll walk you through the admin API, creating an application, creating a project application, setting up views, templates, etc. And then the following weeks will be more on the client and the web client and the server. So initial weeks will be on the server, later weeks will be on the client, and then we'll also talk about frameworks like Angular and mobile applications like mobile frameworks like Cordova and Ionic.
So basically, the idea of this whole Full Stack 21 program is for people to come in, tune in a few hours a week. Of course, we wouldn't say that just watching this will make you a programmer. You need to go back and actually build out some of the references. This is, of course, the very first introductory session, just an overview of Django and try to get people to understand. But yes, I think, Akil, we also will kind of internalize and discuss. I think we have our NDO, our new developer orientation, which is an in-house training module for everyone at our company. So one of the things is we're going to kind of expose this so that more people can benefit and productively use their time in case there is more of a lockdown. So that's about it. Any other notes, Akil? Any final pointers? What do you recommend? I mean, for people to get started with programming, what are the top 1, 2, 3 things that they need to keep in mind?
Okay, so first, I recommend that you, so for Django specifically, I recommend that you have at least a minimum knowledge of Python.
And
So
what
Python is really the,
and what do you recommend for Python? How does someone get a basic understanding?
so first think of what you would like to build, and then think of a minimum version of that MVP as we call it, and then see if
I
you
think
can.
that would be pretty hard. I think, sorry, that would be pretty
No,
hard.
no. Sometimes you have to be thrown into the fire to learn a bit.
Yes, but you shouldn't be thrown to the fire so you'll get burnt completely. There should be a way for you to get out, right? But I think a good start, I mean, the way that I tell my programmers to get started is learn Python the hard way. It's a kind of standard book that I find extremely kind of, what do you call it? It gives you just enough information and doesn't overload you. But I think the last few exercises of learn Python the hard way really, kind of drills down the concepts of Python. So to somebody who wants to start with Django, maybe a good idea is learn Python the hard way. Go through those exercises, and then of course next week we will go through the Django tutorial where it'll be a lot more useful, right? So that's about it for today. A very quick session. Great one, Akil. Good start. Very
Thank you.
concise and kind of drove the point home. So a big thank you to all our viewers who have joined in today. Ashok, Vijeta, Akash, Puneet. Thanks a lot for all your support. Anybody want to come inside, please feel free to raise your hand. I have enabled the raise hand feature. Anybody has anything to share on programming or technology as the main thing? I'm very happy to have Vijeta there. Vijeta, just getting you on the raise hand here. Very good evening, Vijeta.
Hi, Akil. Hi, Jagat. How are you guys doing?
We're doing fantastic. How are you?
Good, good. Good to be on the other side. And, I mean, all these programming languages, the way technology is making so much of difference, it's a big thing. And of course, I've been following of, all this virtual office, the Vmail, the way that remote sales can be leveraged very beautifully on Vidphone, on video. So it's very interesting to see all these activities, Jagat. Thank you so much.
Thank you for all your support, Vijeta, always. Really appreciate that.
Perfect, perfect. And when what's next? I mean, I was listening into the conversation that technology is moving so fast, and there are so many big, big problems that are being solved. And if the founders and small business owners and even practitioners of yoga and all of these guys can come together and leverage the opportunities that are there, it will be so good for the country and for the economy as well.
Absolutely, sir. No doubt about it. And I
Okay,
think
so
we need to get all our kind of focus right now together to battle for the next 3 months. I think India and the pandemic really requires everybody to work together and work innovatively for solutions.
perfect, perfect. Yeah, and thanks, guys. Thanks once again. All the very
Thank
best
you.
with everything.
Thanks
Okay,
a lot, Vijeta.
cheers.
Thank you.
Thank
Have
you.
a great evening.
Bye bye.
Bye. All right. Very nice to start this, and we want to end this session right now. Exactly 6:30. Uh, Almost 6:30 there. Last 5 minutes. I think let's drag this along for 5 minutes. Let's share a couple of notes more on programming. Right. I think one of the things we have seen is people always, that I've seen, right, working with many startups and developers, I think people get too stuck up in the details in programming. One of the things that I always try and drill home is have a scientific temper, and remember that you're never limited by the language that you're learning today. Right? I think many people associate themselves as a Python developer, a Java developer, I don't know, like a React developer today. And I think that's, you know, it tells me that they are not looking long term. For example, every 3 to 4 years, I believe that every company needs to make a huge macro tech shift. It's inevitable. You could still go on with, and that's when we call it legacy, right? You can still go on with your old stuff, but then you realize that you really need to change, overhaul the whole system with something new. And I think that's one of the most important traits of developers today. It's not about having control over one language or something like this. It's really about having your fundamentals and your concepts about programming very, very straightforward, so that it really doesn't matter which programming language or framework you need to be working with. Because as you know, Akil, with some of our enterprise customers, we have some limitations on what technologies can be used as well.
Yes.
And you cannot just go in and say that this is the technology that will work best, because they have a huge infosec team and they have certain constraints. So I think in those scenarios, important to be versatile and fundamentally very strong. So very nice. Last parting words, Akil. I mean, main thing is next week, I think we are looking at a kind of how to, right?
Yeah, a more hands-on session where
Very
I'll be
hands-on.
screen sharing and
Yeah.
I'll walk you through the different aspects. A little bit more practical than this week. This week
Lot
is
more
more
practical. Lot more practical. I think also we would encourage the audience, if they want to try, to
yeah
get an editor, get the basic setup. Next week, I think maybe
yeah.
you can explain the setup as well.
Yeah, so I recommend Sublime Text, but you can also use Visual Studio Code or basically almost any IDE.
Any IDE, any editor, but yes, as you said, our preference is with Sublime Text. I don't mind Atom. Uh, Somehow I avoid heavy, IDEs. It's not really necessary. I would prefer a Sublime Text and Git, maybe a terminal, than having maybe a Visual Studio or something running, right? Because it's kind of unnecessary, right? You really don't need it. So keep things simple. Keep your whole stack very, very concise and small. I think that's how I think the best way people can go forward. So anyway, superb session again, Akil. Kudos. Have a good Sunday, and see you tomorrow morning in the office, in our virtual office. All right. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
Good.